Yesterday I rode with Meredith Peck in her grandma mobile, and a few of my other clergy colleagues from the deep south of Oregon up to Eugene for a special celebration of the Holy Eucharist and renewal of ordination vows and blessing of holy oils with our bishop and other gathered clergy from Central and Southern Oregon. And after the service, we had lunch together in the spacious parish hall at St. Thomas Episcopal Church in Eugene. And I found myself at the table with a man named David, who began as the new rector at Good Samaritan Church in Corvallis a couple of weeks before I started here. And I asked him, where he'd come from, and he said that he'd been in Shoreline, Washington for about 16 years as rector of the church there. And with just a touch of wistfulness, he said that he had established a beautiful program there. And I said, I came here from St. John's in Petaluma, California, where I'd been for 13 and a half years as sort of the second founder of the parish. Because I came there in 2010, a year after the congregation had retaken the property from the former rector and former members of the congregation who, at the end of 2006, made the decision to dissociate themselves from the Episcopal Church because of their opposition to full inclusion of LGBTQ plus persons in the church and women's leadership in the church and, a host, I suppose, of other complaints about the Episcopal Church. And they'd illegally transferred ownership of the parish property to a new entity called St. John's Anglican Church and had parked themselves there in the historic parish property as if it now belonged to them and as if they could then carry on as if otherwise nothing had changed. But a small group of people gathered, first in Betty and Joe Petrillo's living room. I think there were 8 on that first Sunday. And over the succeeding couple of years, they grew in number, and also with the assistance of the Episcopal Diocese of Northern California, they took legal action when all other forms of entreaty had failed to recover the parish property. They moved in July of 2009, and I came at the end of July of 2010. And the next 13 and a half years were a profound experience, I think, for many of us. And we bonded very deeply. So when my wife and I made the decision to have me put my name in for being rector at Trinity, Ashland last summer, there were personal reasons why it made sense. to leave and to come here. But the thing that was uppermost in my mind all along was, how will St. John's Petaluma do without me? And announcing my departure on January 7th was one of the most difficult things I've had to do in my life. But throughout the months that led up to that announcement, and the weeks that followed, and this is the part that I didn't tell my new friend David all of that. I kind of summarized that story. And then I said, but what was really extraordinary was that over the months leading up to that announcement and the weeks that followed, what became clearer and clearer to me was that it was the right time for me to go. Not just for me, not just for my wife and daughter, not just for my in-laws here in Ashland, but for them, for the ministry of St. John's Episcopal Church in Petaluma, California. And I can't say exactly why. And I know there are probably people there who still wonder if that's true. Yet, as tonight's readings suggest to us, sometimes loving all the way to the end means leaving, means letting go, means trusting that one's beloved friends have a relationship with God that transcends you, that will continue to grow and to deepen, and in fact can only fully blossom in the way in which God intends when you leave. And this is our faith, because it's the faith that Jesus had in us. It's the faith that he entrusted to us, because he loves us, because he loved his disciples all the way to the end. And he knew that even though they were afraid, even though one of them would betray him, even though they would desert him that very night, even though Peter would deny him 3 times, even after protesting with great bravado that he would accompany the Lord to his death, Jesus knew that if he changed course now, that if he somehow tried to rally them to his defense, or to escape with them from Jerusalem in the dead of night, if he turned aside from God's will for him, from the truth that he had been sent to bear witness to, before the high priests, and the scribes, and the elders of the people, before the governor, the deputy of Caesar, before the soldiers, before the passers-by, before the thieves beside him on the cross. If he turned aside from that truth, because he did not trust his disciples to understand what he was really doing, what his death really meant, where he had truly come from, and where he was truly going, then he might as well not have come at all. But he did trust them, because he believed in God. He believed in God's love for them, and that God had called them to be his disciples, that they were his own, entrusted to him by God out of all the people in the world, and that God was not finished with them yet, that somehow out of his death they would learn wisdom. They would learn courage. They would learn faith and hope and love like his. And so he gave them the parting gift of this trust. A gift symbolized for us in bread and in wine. Those simple tokens of fellowship that he had shared with them so many times before. And not just with them, but with the sick, the lonely, lost sheep of Israel, with the tax collectors and the sinners and the prostitutes who had come drawn by Jesus, drawn by his love for the world, drawn by his Spirit and his truth. Gave that bread and that wine to them one more time and said, "From now on, this is my body. You share it among yourselves. You take it into yourselves. I become you. You become me in this world." Now, the Gospel of John doesn't actually tell that story. It instead has Jesus pour forth these chapters of poetic discourse, which we'll be hearing from over the weeks of Easter season, all the way through Pentecost, and maybe even beyond. But in order for them to really understand that teaching, which they won't yet, he also gives them this other side of washing their feet, this act of a slave or of a woman taking off his outer garment, putting a towel around his waist, getting down on the floor, the basin of water, washing their feet. Another way of demonstrating his trust in them. Trusting them enough to set them free. Free from him. Free from any idea of his glory that is separate from his humanity. From their own humanity. The glory that he demonstrates by forgiving them even as they betray him and deny him and desert him. The glory that he will show even as he stands mute, as false accusations are piled up against him. The glory of a human being who trusts completely in God's mission